Good evening. Thank you for being here this evening. I'm Paula Sanders, and I am the director of the Boniek Institute for Religious Tolerance here at Rice. Our mission is the study and advancement of religious tolerance among people of all faiths and no faith. We engage in many activities that have to do with the idea of tolerance broadly, including racial tolerance and social justice, because we know that religious tolerance cannot exist in a vacuum. And as part of our programs, we have been privileged over the last couple of years to collaborate with the Office of Multicultural Affairs here at Rice. And last year, or last fall in particular, we were very privileged to be a part of a wonderful program called the Black Men's Leadership Initiative. That took a number of our students to Georgia, where they had the opportunity to meet with a number of people, including Dean Carter. Tonight, I'm not here to introduce Dean Carter to you, but I am here to introduce my colleague, William Edmond, the Assistant Director of the Office of Multicultural Affairs, who will say a few words about Dean Carter before he comes to the stage. Thank you very much for being here.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, and also welcome to tonight's talk. As mentioned, my name is William Edmond, and I serve as the Assistant Director in the Office of Multicultural Affairs. I've been here now at 3 years at Rice, and I've been happy to kind of see some of the program that we're doing, and also to kind of culminate one of the events during Black History Month here tonight with you. For those who may not know, I don't think that I always share my educational background. My undergraduate degree is from North Carolina Central University, historically black college in Durham, North Carolina. So for me, integral to my experience growing up and then also collegiately, the black experience is something that's near and dear to my heart. And I think when I think about HBCUs, Morehouse is one of those schools that I kind of revere and kind of aspire to model in many ways as possible. My experience has kind of been here trying to help formulate the Black Male Leadership Initiative and to decide in what direction I would like to take them. As Paula mentioned, we took a group of 15 young men to Atlanta, Georgia with kind of a few goals, but one of those being to understand the intersectionality of leadership and also as it relates to spirituality. I could think of no one better at the time to welcome us than Dean Carter, and I wanted to also introduce his colleague and my dear friend, Corey Hood, who also hosted us while we were in Atlanta. So that program for us lasted about 5 days and 4 nights and included multiple stops in addition to Morehouse. But in addition to the programming there, for me, I thought it'd be full stop one to bring programming back to Rice and has blossomed into what it is today now, Dean Carter's public talk with us here. For a little bit of his background, I'll share. Dean Lawrence Edward Carter is a dean of the Martin Luther King Jr. International Chapel, professor of religion, a college archivist and curator, founder of the Gandhi King Akeda Institute for Global Ethics and Reconciliation, and also the director of the Martin Luther King Jr. College of Pastoral Leadership. Lawrence Carter was born in Dawson, Georgia, and reared in Columbus, Ohio, and I dare say, go Bucks. He holds the BA degree from Virginia University of Lynchburg in Social Science and Psychology, the Master of Divinity degree in Theology, and the STM degree in Pastoral Care, and a PhD in Pastoral Psychology and Counseling from Boston University. And here I thought enough was a master's degree, and I have to go back to school if I want to compete with Dean Carter. Carter is married to Dr. Marva Griffin Carter, and together they are the parent of one son, Lawrence Edward Carter Jr. He is a sixth-generation Georgian and a graduate of Morehouse College in economics with a minor in internal affairs. One of the things that I wanted to point out that I think may be important to note, in 1958, Martin Luther King Jr. himself privately recruited Dean Lawrence Carter as a 10th grader to come to Morehouse College. 21 years later, Lawrence Carter became the first dean of Morehouse, the Martin Luther King International Chapel in 1979. Today, he's a tenured professor of religion and the founder and sole fundraiser for Morehouse College's International Hall of Honor that consists of over 200 original oil portraits of distinguished leaders in the civil rights human rights nonviolent movement globally. I'm confident that he'll speak upon that tonight, so we know we've kind of included Martin Luther King, but some of his remarks will also include that of Mahatma Gandhi. So please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dean Lawrence Carter, please.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Yes, sir.
Good evening. Good evening. Thank you for coming out, and thank you, Gail, for this beautiful invitation. Some of you now know it's my first time at Rice, and it won't surprise you to hear me say I'm most impressed. I think I would have enjoyed matriculating here. It's good to see any number of you in the audience. I'm so tempted to call names. And I certainly want to recognize Dr. Anthony Penn, whose fame is nationwide and beyond. And for those of you who don't know, we're glad to have a Morehouse alumnus in the audience, Hassan Henderson Lott. Hassan, why don't you stand and let them see you? He's studying here under Dr. Penn. William Edmund, who is, I think, headed for high places in the academy, perhaps the pinnacle of a presidency. He looks the part, and I think he's got his feet on the royal road. You don't have to all say amen. Gail is first class. She's like a steam engine in a skirt. She gets the job done. Now, I think she has told me that I have 3 hours. There are so many ways to begin to talk about how I wrote this book and how it started percolating in me. Ever since I was 15 years old, I have had a passion for strengthening the Christian church. When I was 18, I experienced what is commonly named a call to the Christian ministry. And it was my intention from the beginning to never put any limitations on where I turned for knowledge, understanding, wisdom, or resources. That meant, though I didn't know it at the time, that I wanted to learn from everyone I encountered. And as I looked for someone to teach the world unconditional love, nonviolence, and peace, after Dr. King's death, I discovered that I really wanted to be a moral cosmopolitan, which meant not letting my ethics and my morality be hijacked by the racialized, ethnicized, and the nationalized self, which I had inherited from my culture. Being a moral cosmopolitan is a philosophical precondition to your being an authentic cosmic leader. And I want you to let that term cosmic leader marinate, because if you are alive today, alert and aware, I want you to realize that just being a global leader is not sufficient. You've got to broaden your address in order to deal with climate disaster. Climate change is too nice. We're in serious trouble. The acceleration of technology, globalization, and climate disaster are shrinking the planet so fast that ethnic pluralism, ethical pluralism, and religious pluralism are creating a crisis of interpretation, valuation, and thinking. Daisaku Ikeda, a Japanese Nietzschean Buddhist, is a drum major for moral cosmopolitans, for equality, love, equity, parity, freedom, democracy, care, and justice ethics, for nonviolence and peace. He's all about enlarging your address and evolving your heart so that it is big enough for you to embrace the world. Since I was 4 years old, in the American segregated South, I have longed for someone to teach everybody how to love and respect people's humanity. That's what Martin Luther King Jr. did. He respected everybody's humanity, irrespective of whether they were his oppressors or not. I've always believed that there was someone who could show the way to building a humane society. Jesus' kingdom of heaven on earth. Josiah Royce's beloved community. Mahatma Gandhi's global village. Martin Luther King Jr.'s World House. Nelson Mandela's international solidarity of peace-loving nations. Fethullah Gulen's interfaith and inter-civilizational dialogues. Daisaku Ikeda's global commonwealth of citizens, and my own notion of the beloved cosmic community. Living in all or any of these concepts requires you to enlarge your address beyond just the street you live on. You must become an identity leader, capable of identifying with the needs, the struggles, the difficulty, and the anguish of people around the world. Why has it been so difficult for humanity to follow the teachings of all of its great spiritual masters, exemplars, mentors, pastors, ministers, imams, rabbis, priests, humanists, and theists? Gandhi said, Christianity is beautiful, a beautiful religion. It's too bad nobody's practicing it. Martin King was asked, who should be named Christian of the century? And he said, Gandhi, a Hindu. When he was asked, who should be named preacher of the 20th century? He stepped out of his race and he said, Harry Emerson Fosdick, the founder of Riverside Church, founding pastor of Riverside Church in New York City. Cross-cultural affiliation. That is one of the characteristics. The capacity for cross-cultural affiliation is one of the characteristics of a moral cosmopolitan. Why do persons sense themselves as separate from nature, from society, from spirit, from the cosmic law, from the mystic law, why are we not quite human? Why did Meghan and Harry and Archie have to move to Canada? It's well known. It was published in quite a few newspapers. Most have stopped at being Homo sapien sapiens, being conscious simply that we are conscious, while millions on the planet have already evolved to Homo universitas, or Homo universalis, able to love the whole and not just the parts, able to love beyond boundaries, beyond cultures, beyond nation states. Dr. Ikeda's notion of human or compassionate inner revolution is applicable to the vital contemporary concerns of educators in democratic societies. How students can become respectfully active participants in the democratic process. On July 4th, 1776, the Declaration of Independence of the United States of America became a reality with the pronouncement, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men, and that includes women, are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." When the American founding fathers penned these words 243 years ago, they pointed the world in the direction of democracy and inclusivity. Ikeda stresses the necessity of egalitarianism and inclusivity as the nature of enlightenment, and is one among many who keeps bringing us back to the grand and noble idea of real democracy, which America does not yet have. Gandhi said, "Civilization is the encouragement of differences." Civilization thus becomes a synonym of democracy. Force, violence, pressure, or compulsion with a view to conformity is therefore both uncivilized and undemocratic. How do we learn to live in peace? How do we learn to live the lessons of democracy? Democracy cannot survive with an ignorant population, said Thomas Jefferson. There will never be world peace until the words of Dr. Ikeda are taken seriously. Now, if you have not been listening, I want you to just relax as I'm settling in, and I want you to increase your hearing power, because I'm about to make a statement that I think is very important, and I believe will deal with the crux of what is wrong in human society universally. Quoting Dr. Ikeda, diverse interpretations of the nature of the sacred sharply distinguished Buddhism from the Judeo-Christian religions and Islam. For Buddhism, the most precious of all things is the Buddha nature, or Buddha life, inherent in every sentient being. The pricelessness of the inner Buddha nature is heroically symbolized by the bodhisattvas from the earth, described as rising from within the earth. The essence of the Mahayana teachings. This is a humanistic idea. For Christians and Muslims, on the other hand, the holiest of all things is a supernatural God dominating humanity from remote regions. The idea of God has undergone many transmutations throughout theological history. Nonetheless, people who, like Leo Tolstoy, have attempted to interpret God as the God within, have always been rejected as heretics. I believe our ability to find solutions to the problems facing humanity today will be greatly influenced by whether we regard the sacred entity as exterior and transcendent or interior and immanent. This is where Buddhism and Christianity, Buddha and Jesus, meet as friends of healing and hope. Jesus said, "If you have seen me, you have seen the Father. For the Father and I are one. There is no separation." Each of us is just as sacred, as divine, as holy as Jesus or Buddha. Now, if I were in church, that would be a place for you to say amen. It's very important to be able to affirm yourself at the highest level. Jesus affirms the sacred as interior and immanent. For centuries, we have depended on our institutions of higher education to teach us community, humanity, service, and happiness. As the founder of two major universities, one in Japan and one in America, built on a pedagogy of peace, Dr. Ikeda offers us spiritual wisdom when we are challenged to recognize the sacredness of all human personality, irrespective of nationality, religion, gender, education, skills, economic status, language, race, ethnicity, or culture. Dr. Ikeda agrees with Jesus. The humanist agrees with the theist. But most of the Christian church does not agree with Jesus. If you don't believe me, just ask the great United Methodist Church, which just split over gay rights. I could stay right there a long time, but for your sake, I'm going to move on. W.E.B. Du Bois, one of America's greatest sociologists, once said, and this is subtle, so tune in. The function of the university is not simply to teach breadwinning or to furnish teachers for the public schools or to be a center of polite society. It is above all to be the organ of that fine adjustment between real life and the growing knowledge of life. An adjustment which forms the secret of civilization. Benjamin Elijah Mays told us, every day as humans, we have to make little adjustments in our definitions of everything and in our lives to continue to be relevantly human. We must never stop opening up to human evolution and growth toward affirming sustainable individual difference. The whole species, the whole planet is moving. We are going somewhere. And the universe is not finished with us. Dr. Ikeda promotes the innate goodness and potential of human life, as well as soft power, the soft power of dialogue. Today, more than ever, we need a certain kind of educational institution that promotes international exchange, environmental justice, for all of us to blossom and self-actualize to the maximum. And we need cross-cultural dialogue. We need to talk to each other, and we need to listen. We do not have as much successful cross-cultural discourse as we need because of so much of our education today taking place in a setting of structural violence, which is one-way communication, like now. You see, the fun will start during the question and answer when you get to talk back and tell me you don't believe half of this stuff. I hope you won't do that. Ministers, rabbis, imams, priests, professors, provosts, coaches, CEOs, deans, and presidents are all engaged most often in one-way communication, where there is no feedback from the audience, the class, the congregation especially. It's simply dictation. Spiritual suffering results from structural violence, blocking the flow of wisdom. The highest level of spirituality, please hear this, the highest level of spirituality is sustainable cooperation. When everything is cooperating in your biodata, when everything is cooperating within you, we call that health. When everything is cooperating in society, between governments, universities, corporations, industries, courts, and spiritual communities, we call that civilization. And when everything is cooperating in the cosmos, we can experience night and day, the four seasons, and we can name the constellations. I'm talking about sustainable cooperation. And where there is sustainability, there is justice. Sustainability is a synonym for justice. We are spiritual beings living in a spiritual universe. Faith is proleptically present. Proleptic means anticipated. Faith is proleptically present in every human being. You cannot eradicate faith. It is not the property of any one religion, ideology, or institution. It belongs to all human interaction itself. Right now, you're demonstrating faith that the chair you're sitting in is going to sustain you. That when you pick up your feet, you have faith that terra firma will be there to receive it when you put it down. You can't do anything without faith. Dr. Ikeda calls for an unlimited, irrevocable covenant of selfless devotion to people. I think that's what Dr. Penn is calling for in his emphasis on humanism. An irrevocable covenant of selfless devotion to people. Neighbors first. A sustainable cooperation is wisdom, not just knowledge. Spiritual wisdom is not just information. He encourages everyone to grow up into the crown of authentic humanity. Dr. Ikeda tells us to be cosmic citizens, not global citizens, but cosmic citizens. His vision of the future is rooted in the lessons of the past. He's growing up in Japan during World War II, 1939 to 1945, with a traumatic effect upon his family and country of 2 atomic bombs falling on Japan, Hiroshima and Nagasaki. If you want to study Enlightenment values, there's no better people to study than those who help bring those values to reality. Who are those people? The Nichiren Buddhist of Japan, the Afro-Baptist Christians of America, with a few others cast in for seasoning, and the Jain-oriented Hindus of India. And we don't think about this very much, but you can include in this group the Negro slaves getting emancipated by Lincoln to free them so they could fight on the Union side for democracy, to help save the Union. The North could not have won without the Negro slaves. Dr. Ikeda provides us identity leadership. We must have the capacity to identify with others who are not like us. So he opened up the closed society of Japan to the world and was greatly ridiculed for it, with terrible graffiti being written on the walls of subways in Tokyo about him. He demonstrated an interest in others beyond Japan and identified with their personal needs, anguish, and distress. He expanded his address. Do you watch TV and say, oh, it's a shame what's happening to those people over there? Me, not me. We're safe here, bounded by two great oceans. Well, 91101 changed that. And all the headlines of today's paper convinced us we're not safe from the coronavirus. If you ask what is war, the answer is fear. If you ask what is hatred, the answer is fear. If you ask what is intolerance, the answer is fear. If you ask what is indifference, the answer is fear. Trust in nuclear arms is a negation of trust in humanity. We don't need a Defense Department. We need a Peace Department. And there are plans to try to build more nuclear weapons. And we can't even use the ones we have without fulfilling the prophecy of being the first species with the power to extinguish ourselves. The more people trust in arms, the less they trust in each other. Ceasing to put their trust in arms is the only way to cultivate mutual trust among people. We have weapons because we fear others. And we fear others because we don't know them. We are ignorant of our neighbors. All of these varying forms of fear are rooted in the fact that Americans are monolingual and we don't travel. And you know the statement, he or she who never travels thinks that their mother is the best cook. So we cultivate fear of and hatred for those who are not like us. Ever since I was 5 days old, I have been in the Baptist church. And because of my love of the church, it is certain that I will remain in the church until my final day on the planet, even though I know that much of the church's work is hypocritical. In the church, in spite of the hypocrisy, I learned that God so loved the world that God gave. The church was introduced to me as a community of love and giving. But the world was and is a challenge because it comes not from a place of love, but a place of fear. Nothing in life is to be feared. It is only to be understood. Now is the time to understand more, so we may fear less. There are many illustrations of this, and I'm tempted to stop, but I'll go on. Lack of understanding produces evil. whereas understanding brings good. There is a cognitive and intellectual road to peace. But we must own our learning. Religion is responsibility, or it is nothing at all. Jesus said, I must need go by Samaria. The Jews and the Samaritans hated each other. The disciples, the apostles, were shocked. Jesus said, I'm going anyway. I've never gotten over the fact that Jimmy Carter was forced to fire Andy Young as United States ambassador because during one of the recesses in the General Assembly, he got up out of his seat and recognized across the aisle an ambassador from the Arab Palestinian territory and started a conversation. And that was a violation of the State Department's rules. It was instantly reported to the White House, and Jimmy Carter was forced, against his wishes, to fire him. Andy Young had learned during the Civil Rights Movement, working with Martin King, to be a reconciler. So you see, the work that's going to happen will have to happen outside of the realm of government. That would be our assignment. I'm so happy that you've invited me to Rice, and so delighted that I got to meet your president. We had a wonderful conversation, and he tutored me marvelously. Jesus said, other sheep I have that you know not of, them too I must bring. That sounds like Jesus was very oriented toward interfaith engagement, talking to people who did not agree with him. And the biggest litmus test for the church, Jesus said, you will know them by their fruits, by their actions. And then he said, love your enemies. That's a high hurdle. And I could see you grimace as I said that. That's what it means to be a moral cosmopolitan. Do I have any takers? Not bad. A few hands went up. But there were no amens. Gandhi said that his search for the truth led him to Leo Tolstoy, a Russian writer who believed in the idea of simplicity of life, purity of purpose, love as the law of life, principles of nonviolence, love for all humankind. Both Tolstoy and Gandhi adopted the idea of universal love to solve the problems of life. Jesus went from conflict resolution to conflict lovolution. King said, Jesus led him to Gandhi. Nelson Rockefeller led me to the black Muslims, paid my way, and 35 other black seminarians from across the nation to spend the day with Elijah Muhammad and spending the night at the University of Chicago. King led me to Daisaku Ikeda. You see, Baptists believe in freedom of conscience. See, that's permission for you to think for yourself. It's called in ethics autonomy competency. A country's culture and history are not self-contained units. All have borrowed from each other. All people from Istanbul, Turkey, know what I'm saying because their native land is called the crossroads of civilization. Jewish, Christian, Muslim. The separate civilizations of Eurasia interacted from the beginning, exchanging new knowledge and old wisdom. Rome was the world's first city to reach a population of 1 million. To feed that population, international agricultural trade and commerce started with African nations to feed all of the Roman citizens. Dr. Ikeda is a moral cosmopolitan with his international trips and 50 published dialogues, books in book form. His dialogues with scholars, experts, and authorities on transdisciplinary subjects. He has engaged in sending 36 annual peace proposals since 1983 to the General Assembly of the United Nations on how to reform the Parliament of the People in preparation for global governance, addressing subjects such as disarmament, globalism, the interconnectedness of all life, ecology, sustainability, nonviolence, war, peace, and Nietzschean Buddhist enlightenment values for the 21st century. Dr. Ikeda has brought us back to the pattern of Buddha, Jesus, Gandhi, King, Mandela, Tolstoy, Thoreau, and Mother Teresa. A pattern that unites people across all boundaries with what Martin King called agape love, social democracy, whoops, peace with justice, inclusive culture, liberal education, cosmopolitan dialogue, global travel, mutual happiness, compassionate mentors, planetary nonviolence. There are 3 ways of thinking about a problem: inside the box, outside the box, and where there is no box. The pathless path. J. Krishnamurti. The sustainable way of thinking about problems today is thinking without a box. It means putting no limitation on your curiosity with your beliefs. No straitjacket, as I said earlier, on your ethics or morality. It means cross-cultural, cross-national affiliation, or revealing, creating the ideal of personality. You notice I said revealing. You see, what you want in this world is not out here. What you want in this world is already inside of you. You were born with it. That's the talk that I could go off on for another 30 minutes. Dr. Ikeda left Japan in the search for common ground. Leaving home, your country, is a practice that has solved many problems. Mordecai Y. Johnson, Benjamin E. Mays, Howard Thurman, Bayard Rustin, Martin King, Nelson Mandela, all left their nations in search of the answers to American segregation and South African apartheid. We are immersed in a global dialogue about values. The foundation of thinking is valuation, not reason. I said earlier to a group of your students, if you can determine what a person values, like Donald Trump, then you'll better understand how he reasons. What are his values? Power, money, property. There's one more. He values these things. I'm gonna let you come up with your own one that I'm missing. Your values control your thinking. And maybe that's why we think that we're not sure when he's telling the truth. Talking with people is always about data. It all depends on the connections you make and what you learn about culture and people. But to learn about people, you must keep moving. You can't be a couch potato. This is the only way to create a dynamic stability in an age of acceleration. That's how you maintain your balance on a bike. You keep moving. You stop moving, then you fall. But you must be self-motivated in a time that requires lifelong learning. How's my time? Okay. Dr. Ikeda has spent his life creating social technologies for organizing to capture the benefits of social contact for global and cosmic community. Empathy comes about through human interaction. Social technology for cosmopolitan dialogue is the only way to begin meeting the challenges of our time. Sensei, that's another name for Dr. Ikeda that the Japanese use. It means teacher. He teaches us the importance and sensitivity to Enlightenment values for the new world that is coming and is already here. What is the language of some of these sustainable values? Coherently criticized wants or values? If something is not a coherently criticized desire, it's not a value. That's a classical definition from ethics. Ecological responsibility, value creation, diversity maturity, vertically challenged, gender justice, quality control, the physically challenged, gender neutral, inclusive language, ethical and religious pluralism, multiculturalism, communication between silos, ethical allyship, unconditional ethics of cosmopolitanism. There's a discrepancy between the politics of cosmopolitanism and the ethics of cosmopolitanism. The ethics of cosmopolitanism are unconditional. The politics of cosmopolitanism are conditional. The only way to address the disparity between those two is with the call of the prophet and the theological call, theological cosmopolitanism. The list of sustainable values continues. Intersectionality, transdisciplinary exploration, universal humans, smoke-free zones, profanity-free zones, nuclear-free zones, homophobia-free zones, xenophobia-free zones, distance learning, issue-sensitive, time-sensitive, quantum leaps. I'm just giving you some of the language that seems to be at the cutting edge of trying to get at how we can express the feelings, the ethos to move us along, to get us closer to rubbing hearts and not just elbows. We are the only species that kills its own kind. A moral person cannot patiently adjust to injustice. We must become transformed nonconformists, said Dr. King. Sensei's educational philosophy says, education must foster love for humanity, develop character, and provide an intellectual foundation for realizing peace and empowering people to contribute to society. The 20th century was a near triumph of liberal democracy. I'm drawn to Dr. Ikeda's life because it has been a visible rehearsal time to move us toward global governance, beyond international law to cosmopolitan law. Happiness does not mean mere pleasure. Indulgence, self-seeking, cowardice, laziness, or complacency, where the development of personality ceases. From these egotistical perspectives, we are left with immature and arrogant individuals, unable to grow out of their childish ways of never listening to others. You realize that's one of the big reasons that Hillary did not become president, which shocked even Barack Obama, just like Brexit shocked David Cameron. There were huge segments of the American population who believed that they were not heard. And they wanted to gamble on something that they wouldn't have likely tried, because the thing that really stunned us was that Mr. Trump became president with the help of many of the same people who voted for Barack Obama. That's an insight. So Dr. Ikeda talks about an attitude of creativity, exhilaration, joy, accomplishment, deep fulfillment, purpose, and enlightenment that evokes creativity in students. Happiness is obtained through fully realizing our potential while not being swayed by circumstances, but seeking to tower above circumstances. It says that freedom has many different dimensions, which may be classified under the categories of personal freedom, social freedom, and religious freedom. Freedom is a constant creation of value. Freedom is not a gift. Freedom is an achievement. Just like marriage. Marriage is not a gift. It is an achievement. And most of us are more married after you've been married 10 years or more than you were when you said, I do. You have to work at it. We must abandon anti-democratic and uncivil practices. This is the raison d'etre for Dr. Ikeda's educational philosophy and what it means to grow up into democracy's crown, being able to dialogue and cooperate affirmatively in spite of differences and build a society of hope pointing toward the ultimate goal of harmonious unity in peaceful coexistence with diversity. Thank you very much.
At this time, I'll speak loud enough for us to hear. At this time, I wanted to open it to question and answer to the audience. We have two microphones, one to my right, your left, my right, my left, your right. Feel free to join us, and we'll take as many as we can. Immediately following question and answer, we'll also have time for a live reception out back. Thank you all for joining us. Can we give Dean Carter one more round of applause?
Hey, don't be bashful.
Hello. So my question is basically, when trying to, I guess, progress this sort of sustainable, approach to viewing life, right? How do you deal with people who sort of are unwilling to step outside of their comfort of belief, if that makes sense?
We were talking about that earlier today with regard to the whole issue of race. It is no secret that many people are frustrated by the fact that most efforts to start a dialogue around race have failed. And we don't always understand why bringing up the very subject appears to make Anglos fall completely silent. And so, you just heard me say in my speech, you can't force people to go where they don't want to go. So that requires learning the virtue of patience. But you know, the whole nation was taught a powerful lesson not long ago, which many African Americans were stunned by. Most Black Americans think that they understand white people. And so, when Hillary Clinton was running for the presidency against Barack Obama, and they were headed to Iowa, most Black Americans said, oh, it would be a wonderful thing to have a Black president. But we're not numerous enough to elect one by ourselves. And we want to win. We want to get behind a winning candidate. And so, even though we kind of silently agree with Bill Clinton that the Obama campaign is a fairy tale, we won't talk about it, but we'll get behind Hillary. we think she has a better chance because we've never had a black president, and it isn't likely that whites are ready for that. Well, you remember what happened. They got to Iowa, and contrary to popular opinion, Barack won Iowa. And blacks went, oh my God, what just happened? Iowa? There are not many black folk in Iowa. Very few, if any, black politicians in Iowa. And the Anglos there voted for Barack. Now let's just stop right there for a minute. It became clear to African Americans that the white citizens of Iowa had actually, on the down low, done more personal homework than blacks realized. And it wasn't done in public. It wasn't done with race dialogues, and it wasn't done with flags and neon signs. But African Americans misread the white mindset of the state of Iowa because we never believed that they would have voted the way they did. But they did. And so most black Americans said, oh, I think we're going to have to reassess the situation. Barack's possibilities. And between Iowa and New Hampshire, African Americans got excited. Something had shifted. You never know the effect that you're having on your neighbors. Are you feeling me?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Don't underestimate people's capacities to do hairpin turns, to get it right. Somebody believed in you to get you where you are today. Believed in you before you had the strength to believe in yourself. And many of us believed in ourselves with somebody else's strength till we were strong enough to believe in ourselves with our strength. So, patience. And showing up in the world, being the thing itself, yourself. Did you get that?
Yes.
Revealing what is already within you. Not waiting for somebody to love you. You love them anyway. And that will be your reward. How's that? Okay.
Thank you for your thoughts about cosmopolitan ethics and pluralism. My question is about equality, egalitarianism of women particularly.
Of women?
Women, yes.
Mm-hmm.
I just wondered, to be able to do injustice, I thought, people who are doing injustice need to have courage. How is it that 240 years ago, men thought that I can vote, my mother, sister, or wife cannot? And they were not given the right to vote for until about 100 years ago. And even today, the Equal Rights Amendment is still in a limbo. Now, how does it happen? I just wonder. And why did women not revolt? On day one, maybe thousands of years ago, they have been treated like that.
You said, how did women not do what?
Not revolt
Not
against
revolt.
inequality and injustice.
That's a very good question. And maybe I should ask the women to respond to that. But, you know, to a great extent, all of us have been culturally conditioned to live with inside roles. I'm convinced that it's primarily women who are the larger number in the church who have prevented us from having more women pastors. There's always more going on between us. You know, there's a lot being written about bodies. There's so many dynamics. People go places and join for different reasons. And they get different things out of these meetings, which may not be explained in the mission statements, the objectives, and the goals and visions of institutions. I don't think the ERA amendment has passed in Georgia. I could be wrong. Does anyone here know? Has it passed in Texas?
I haven't heard about that ERA amendment in so long.
Yeah, the
Virginia.
Equal Rights Amendment.
Virginia's
Well,
passed it.
Virginia just passed it.
Yep.
I guess my point is, I think Malcolm X had a quote that said, if white people want to be, I'll paraphrase this, if white people want to be fair, we don't need any more laws. Why do you need an equal rights amendment if everything else in the Constitution is true? It makes no sense. If they'll just follow the rest of the Constitution, why do you need an equal rights amendment?
I'm not qualified to
I'm just, it's just,
say
it's a rhetorical.
what brought that about. We have so many codes, so many moral codes or ethical codes, so many value systems, so many commandments. I do believe that women are the most oppressed on the planet.
Yes.
And I have tried personally not to be a part of it. You heard it announced when I was introduced that we have over 200 oil portraits in the King Chapel and in 5 of the buildings. 20, I think about 20 of the oil portraits are women. But the female students at Spelman College across the street still criticize us that we don't have enough pictures of women in the chapel library. But at Spelman across the street, they don't have any of men. Somewhere I read in the sacred book, take the beam out of your own eye before you start messing with the mote in somebody else's. That hasn't stopped them. I don't know if you have an answer to your own question or not.
Texas
No,
did
I
pass
don't.
The equal rights
But
amendment.
Texas passed the Equal Rights Amendment. Check on Georgia.
And, no, and then before that, Texas had passed a state equal rights amendment for women,
I'm impressed.
about 10 years before that.
10 years
I'm
before that.
impressed too.
Yeah, he just Googled it.
I'm Googled.
Yeah.
I'm gonna check Georgia.
what you talked about the violence, and that is, I think Galton in Norway has done the typology of the violence. And he talks about the structural and cultural violence, like the cultural violence that was happening in South Africa with the apartheid and all that. I think with women, we probably have been doing this violence right from the beginning, and that's, right in the beginning, you talked about egalitarianism and equality. And that's what made me ask this question. Why have we been doing violence against these women? I don't think I have got an answer, and I thought you may have it, and that's why I asked.
Sorry, I can't.
If I may, I'd like to get 2 more questions on the microphone, then also transition. I think we can ask questions in a more intimate setting in the lobby here too. But thank you for posing that. It's a tough one. I think he'll probably give you some more one-on-one. But do we have a preference? Who goes first?
Yeah. Thank you for this lecture. My question, I don't know how can put it delicately. I grew up in China and came to the United States for graduate school education. And I learned more about, I did not grow up with any religion, but I came here and learned more about Christian belief, I guess maybe in the South more like a Baptist. I'm very interested in the book, the title, Baptist preacher versus Buddhist teacher. As you know, I don't know if you all get the same lesson. The message I got from the church usually, you know, Christian is the only way to the truth, the life, and you know, so on and so forth. And then growing up in the East, you know, the Chinese history had 5,000 years, you know, with about maybe 2 or 3,000 years before Christ was born. And the Buddhists, I guess, also have different path. How you see before the East and the West really connected that much, people separated, they can find their path to heaven, right? So now we all connect so much together. What do you see how the religion can be united, or maybe have a message that can be inclusive to everybody, especially maybe people in the East, I don't know, Buddhist, or just inclusive in that way. And I have been attempted to, even within myself, you know, I came here, I learned about Christian, I think it's great religion, and I try to learn what Christ is teaching, but also within myself, I have internal struggle about how to reconcile the Western teaching and the Eastern, you know, the philosophy. What would be the message you would say, just unite this together so there will not be conflict in terms of Christian faith talking about the only way, right? And versus the other way. If there's other way, or, that's my question.
No, that's an excellent question. Gandhi said that we should make a career of humanity, that is, studying humanity. And so he was deeply involved in learning the religions of the world. What you're calling for is a study that would give us a significant volume or set of volumes on the sacred philosophies of the world. I have discovered if you go down deep enough in Hinduism, Buddhism, Judaism, and Christianity, Islam, you will discover a subterranean river of wisdom running beneath all of them that is basically the same. And the people who tap into that subterranean river are the mystics in each tradition. It is said that if Buddha and Jesus and Muhammad and Moses all went into a room and sat down to a table to begin a conversation, that they wouldn't be in there long, because they would quickly come to agreement and find the meeting unnecessary. It's their followers who get mixed up, and it's like they want to worship these sages, saints, avatars, these who are identified as the founders of religion. And this is why on his deathbed, Muhammad said to his followers, "Don't do to me what the Christians did to Jesus." Go right ahead.
Yeah, but if that's the truth, then there's no necessary for conversion. Would you say that?
There's something I didn't get.
It's not necessary for conversion.
Right. Right. I made the point of how Jesus did not think it robbery to be like God. It's like taking matters into his own hands. We've forgotten that Jesus, it's recorded that he said, "Ye are gods." I think we are afraid of these ideas. Howard Thurman said to me, as I was getting ready to come to Morehouse, we were at the University of Southern California, and I was picking up as many little nuggets from him to sort of prepare myself. And he'd already responded to how I should start. And at one point, he stopped and looked at me and he said, "When you get to Atlanta, walk among the 100 crimson hills, listening to the voice. Then become the voice." When I first heard that, my immediate thought was heresy. Well, he's asking me to be God. But the longer I lived with that, that's what I think Jesus was asking his disciples to do. Become the voice. It might kind of frighten you. I have a friend who said that when he was being called and he didn't want to be a minister, and he was running from it, that he got on the floor and crawled and was screaming. And he was screaming, "I don't want to be that holy." I think there are a lot of us in that boat. We know we've been tapped. Tag, you're it. But we don't want to be it. It's too hard. Nonviolence can get you killed.
The follow-up question is,
Wait a minute, I want to tell you something that happened in King Chapel. I stood up one day, I was called on spontaneously to speak to the freshmen. The speaker didn't show up. And I had prepared nothing. I didn't know I was going to be asked to speak. And in the course of my comments, I said, "Now brace yourself, because I'm going to say something that's going to shock some of you." They didn't know what I was going to say. And I said, "There is no devil." And on the front row, there was a little ABC sitting there, and he said, "Oh, shucks, I can't have any fun." You know, there are certain things we live by. People don't realize you can't have two ultimates. You know, it's a universe, not a dual verse. You know, you create all kinds of philosophical problems for yourself, positing two ultimates. Somebody else wanted to say something.
just,
Oh, sorry.
what you were saying, so there, according to that logic, there'd be no reason for conversion. But obviously, maybe only we know there's many people in this city are trying to be missionaries to reach this message to save the people who never heard about Jesus, right? So if that's the case, maybe they're just basically doing things not needed to be done, or are we supposed to save these people who are trying to save the people? You know what I mean? Because they're seriously, I know people who gave their lives to serve God, to share the gospel with other people, go to Middle East, some of them have been killed, or go to China. You know, Chinese government against sharing gospel in China. They have to be secret to be a teacher and this and that. So if that's the logic, why these people waste their life and resources? Should we save them?
Dean Carter, I want to pause and connect you two to speak offline. I want to take one last question. I want to transition, please.
Okay. I'll see you right afterwards.
Yes, sir. Is that a question?
Yeah. So, my background, my dad's a pastor. He was a pastor before I was even in the womb. I grew up in the church. I firmly have a firm belief in Jesus Christ. I was one of those guys which you were talking about earlier that kind of everybody in the church saw me as, you know, I was supposed to be the next pastor. I had a calling before I knew I had a calling. And I went to college, played basketball, did all these things, came back home, and I've been working in the medical field doing nursing for about 13 years. I always knew that I wanted to do something to be able to give back because my mom was a teacher and a principal, and my dad was a pastor. So I always felt like I was drawn to being able to help people. But I felt like so much of what I was doing was something that other people kind of forced me or kind of led me to do. And I never really got the choice to kind of make decisions for myself. And so now that I'm a father and I have two daughters, I'm a firm believer in being able to nurture informed decisions. And I feel like, especially in this country, but it happens in other countries as well, like the three main things that we really should focus on that determine our life path is our political beliefs, our religious beliefs, and our careers. And I believe in those three aspects and those three areas in particular, those are mostly led by your parents or how you grew up. The way you vote, the career path you take, and basically what you believe in is kind of something that it's inheritedly, like you were saying earlier, it's something that you just kind of, you go with it because it's been pushed on you or it's been influenced on you, and you never really kind of get to figure out what you want to major in, what you really believe in, what you want, who is it that you truly want to vote. You grew up Democratic, you just kind of go Democratic, you really don't research it. And because I was the type of person where I was kind of considered the black duckling of the family. Like I always had to research everything and I had questions, and because I wanted to know why I was doing what I was doing instead of just making it a common practice. And so now I've recognized the calling and I've recognized through life ups and downs, and I'm now pursuing a bachelor's in College of Biblical Studies. But my question to you is basically, what is it that you feel like really brought you to the point to where you were able to, because I researched you before I came here, because we were supposed to come as a group, but you know, that was a long story. So I came by myself. But I was so, after I researched you and read up on you, I really wanted to know, after you said that you had been mentored by Martin Luther King, after you had went through and you had saw his teachings and the stuff that he had been teaching you and the stuff that he was preaching, you felt like it had been diluted, and that was what caused you to go into Buddhism and research Gandhi and stuff like that, because I'm a firm believer in researching other religions and other like, I don't want to be ignorant, and the root word of ignorant is to ignore. I don't want to ignore what other people feel or what other people think, because I feel like it's best to understand how they feel and what they believe in order to understand them more. So what was it that personally brought you to the point, after being, you know, growing up in a Baptist church, following Martin Luther King, seeing the oppression, seeing that his message was kind of being diluted, and seeing the aftermath that came after that, what was it that still kept you motivated to be able to learn other religions and also be inclusive, but still stay true to yourself? And what would you recommend other leaders who are people who are trying to be leaders? What is it that you recognize that you would probably, like a keynote, like if you want to be a leader, this is what I would give you and equip you with to go out and pursue it?
The first thing I would say, I said in my address, you have to own your learning. You have to make the decisions and become determined that you are going to manifest an education. Not get one, manifest one. Christians are supposed to be compassionate, loving people. But we are not taught in the Christian church how to respect people who are just as committed and just as dedicated to their faith tradition as we are. Christians only know how to do two things: convert non-Christians or diss them. I'm trying to demonstrate with this book a respect for another faith tradition, and that the Christian witness isn't so mature and so developed that it can't learn how to be better and improve being in dialogue with persons of other faith traditions. There will always be people to tell you what to do if they perceive that you refuse to own your own destiny. That's not going to stop. So you have to have the confidence in the drums you hear, in your own vision that is pulling you or pushing you. You know, our hormones are very powerful. And they're not going to stop until you're dead. We all have the same challenges. We have to be disciplined. We have a hard time adjusting to delayed gratification. It's not just a few of us, it's all of us. No exceptions. So you're not alone. But remember, every time you are weak, you give in when you shouldn't. There will be consequences. That's a part of what it means. Realizing that is a part of what it means to be an adult. Nothing profound about that. That's just the name of the game. Let every situation and everybody you encounter teach you. You can learn from children. The best teachers learn how to teach from teaching experiences with the students who will tell you how they best learn. I know, I've been doing it for 40 years. If you somehow are convinced that practicing a particular educational theory is the way to go, you're going to be in trouble. And I'm not saying don't get the educational theory. I'm not sure I'm addressing everything that you mentioned, but I've always been interested in peace. It's all I really want in the world is peace. I've always been interested in a stronger leadership in the Christian church, because the church is far from doing what it was founded to do. Not expediency, but transformation. And I know now that I'm going to graduate from this dimension with some disappointments. I won't be the first. With shattered dreams, but at least I want to do what I can do while I'm presiding. Because I know I'm going to get a curtain call.
Pause right here. Two things for me. I wanted to say thank you and present you with a gift, if you don't mind. I'm sure the crowd. We wanted to frame a photo of our young man who went through a man from his statue of Dr. Martin Luther King. So from us here at Rice to you, this is our gift we'd like to present you with. I'll give you something small on the way out. For me, I haven't had a chance to say so already. Listed here are all of our sponsors who help make this event possible. Thank to each of you all, name by name, person by person. Forgive my head and not my heart that I don't call everyone out by time, but thank you all for making this event possible. With Dean Carter, such an intellect sharing his words of wisdom with us tonight. For those who can't stay around for a couple more minutes, we'll gather outside for a reception. For those who have to go, we say thank you for your time tonight, and hopefully you got something rewarding out of participating in this event.
Thank you.